Greetings and welcome to the Decade of Digital Inclusion event today. It's part of the series on state case studies and virtual workshops. And in particular, we're focusing on California. And the title, as you all seen, is Connecting California from Community Perspectives to Funded Projects. And we'll hear a great deal more about that from our distinguished set of panelists who you see before you right now. I'm Dennis Roberson, and I'm a member of the Marconi Society board, and am delighted to be representing the society and its sponsorship for this event. I'm also humbled a bit in serving that role because the person who should be sitting here now is Vint Cerf. Vint Cerf is currently in Kuwait, receiving yet another very well-deserved honor. But in his place, I do have that special opportunity to welcome you. And I personally am looking forward to hearing from our panelists and the insightful information that they have to share about the progress that's being made in California. And hopefully those in the audience will learn a great deal from this, even as I am learning from this august group. I'm going to turn things over, even though he's not here personally or live. I'm going to turn things over to Vint Cerf by virtue of a recording that he's made, and let you hear from the man himself, the chairman of the Marconi Society, and of course, as you all know, the co-inventor or creator of the internet itself. So with that, if we could have the video, we'll move forward.
Hello, my name is Vint Cerf. I'm chairman of the board of the Marconi Society. Our mission at the Marconi Society is to encourage and celebrate the innovators who push the technical and creative and entrepreneurial boundaries of information and communications technology for the benefit of humanity. I'd like to welcome you now to our State Studies series, Case Studies series, a national inflection point, the intersection of research and education networks and sustainable digital equity initiatives. Some of you may not be aware of the central role of education and research networks, academic networks, in the history of the internet, which continues today. In the early stages, of course, the internet was an experiment and the academic community was vitally involved in it. Today, that academic community continues to push the boundaries, which is so well aligned with our purposes at the Marconi Society. We'd like to thank our partner in this series, CNEC, which runs California's Research and Education Network and is a key part of the middle mile build-out for California's broadband academic network. And the Network Startup Resource Center at the University of Oregon, which has been working globally for over 30 years to provide the equalizing force of connectivity for all, but especially through the academic centers of countries around the world. We're just beginning a once-in-a-lifetime investment by federal and state governments, billions of dollars to go into infrastructure that will increase access to the internet throughout the country. There are some very critical issues that have to be addressed, however, in order to make this investment successful and to deliver the benefit which we all hope that it will provide. Funding is being directly provided from the federal government to states and tribal territories. And the consequence of that is that the states and tribal members need to be fully prepared to execute on this largesse, to know where to spend the money, how to spend the money, in what amounts, and for what kind of infrastructure. And this series helps to illuminate how those decisions can be made in the most effective way. We're also concerned about real digital equity, and through digital literacy and through access to devices and affordable communications capability in order to make this effort successful. We need to start planning now for all of the effort that will be required to spend all of these funds wisely. The Research and Education Network and networks of the United States and the rest of the world are key parts of the continued growth and use of the internet. Its development rested heavily on the academic community, and that community continues to push the boundaries of the system. We're key partners at the Marconi Society in this effort, and we welcome you to this series.
I am pleased to introduce Louis Fox as our moderator today. He's the president and CEO of CENIC and the founding CEO of the Golden State Net. The Corporation for Education Network Initiatives in California, or CENIC, is a nonprofit public benefit technology corporation that provides broadband networks for research, education, libraries, medical centers, culture and scientific organizations, and tribal nations in California. Over 12,000 institutions and 20 million students, faculty, teachers, researchers, clinicians, staff, and library patrons use the CENIC network. More recently, CENIC was asked to serve as the third-party administrator on the state's $3.8 billion middle mile initiative, doing business as the Golden State Net. And I understand from Louis that that was quite a significant surprise to be asked to serve in that role, but he has taken it on, and a very important role it is. Louis himself served for nearly 3 decades as a faculty member, researcher, and senior administrator at the University of Washington in my home state, and at Duke University, where my son graduated. He has expertise in the application of IT in emerging economies, as well as in unserved and underserved communities in the Western US. He was a co-investigator on the APEC Emerging Infectious Disease Network, which served Pacific Rim economies for over 15 years, and is the principal investigator on the National Science Foundation-funded Pacific Wave International Exchange. He's worked on digital equity issues since the advent of the public internet. So with that, as a brief overview of the many things that Louis has done, let me hand things over to him. Take it away, Louis.
Thank you, Dennis. Thanks, Vint, for the introduction. We also have as co-sponsors of this event, the Southern California Tribal Chairmen's Association, the Tribal Digital Village, and the Quilt, which is an organization of all the regional and state networks in the United States. I want to also thank the Marconi Society for sponsoring this inaugural conversation. With organizations like my own, CENIC, we've been engaged in digital equity initiatives for nearly 3 decades. Our focus has been, of course, on community anchor institutions, schools, libraries, colleges, universities, healthcare, governmental organizations, and so on. But this opportunity to share work across state, tribal, and even national boundaries is critical, particularly at this moment when we finally have resources that are nearly commensurate with our aspirations as states and as a nation. This case study of California is a snapshot only. There are a wealth of rich and diverse organizations that have been toiling in the digital equity fields since the advent of the public internet. Missing from our panel, and otherwise we would have had a cast of thousands, and we probably would have had a panel that went on for 2 or 3 days. There are some key organizations and individuals. The California legislature has had incredible foresight around digital equity for a very long time, working in partnership with the California Public Utility Commission and the communications division there to fund last mile projects, to fund an analog of the FCC's E-rate in California, very imaginative programs. We have municipal planning organizations, we have regional planning organizations, we have rural planning organizations. There are a number of tribal technology organizations. There are numerous government agencies, and I mentioned one, but we have the California Department of Technology, a relative newcomer to the broadband equity arena. We have Caltrans, and we have the California Emerging Technology Foundation, and the inimitable Sonny McPeak, who's a force of nature, who's been working on digital adoption issues for decades. As I said, I think our legislature and our governor, Governor Newsom, really had incredible foresight and committed $6 billion worth of resources towards digital equity in all of its forms: access, adoption, affordability. This session, however, we're going to focus on the issue of access. And because, as I said, we would have had a cast of thousands. And what I'm hoping to do here is to have sort of three segments here. In the first segment, we're going to focus on perspectives from the community. What does the community tell us? How are they organized? What are their views of digital equity? What are their plans? The second section is going to focus on California public policy and funding. And the third section will look at the California's Middle Mile initiative as a key equity strategy. And then in the end, we'll take questions from all of you who are joining us and taking time out of your busy days to have this conversation with us. So with that, I am going to turn now to perspectives from the community with Connie Stewart, Matt Rantanen, and Kevin Harbour. They're going to introduce themselves through the work that they do, but if you want to know more about them, we have extensive biographical material on the Marconi Society website, and so you can get to know them that way as well. So Connie, first to you.
Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning to some of us in California. I'm Connie Stewart, the Executive Director of Initiatives for Cal Poly Humboldt, and I've been working on getting more broadband deployment in my region since 2003. Actually started working because we ran out of the ability to have phone lines for local businesses in some of our remote areas. And at the time, Pacific Bell said, maybe we ought to build a fiber optic project to your region. And so that was the launch of my career in fiber deployment. We got the first line and we said, thank you, can we have more of that? And so in 2009, the community came out with a plan to get ubiquitous broadband middle mile so that our existing local companies could get better service and better quality service to residents. And we really meant, for equity reasons, ubiquitous. And I should stop and just say that I love these panels, and thank you so much for having me, because I treat them as therapy. It's lonely on the ground trying to get more service to your community. And oftentimes, what's happened is over the years, companies have come in and they've cherry picked the best spots. And they really work hard to hold on to those customers. And so it's hard to get service to places need it, often who have populations that are lower income or more dispersed. I live in an incredibly challenging geographic region where, with hills and valleys and gullies, I have 6 providers, 100 gigs to my house, but a mile away from me is a family that has no service. 5 miles away from me is a town that has no service. I happen to live in a town that's bigger. And so legacy companies skipped over towns. And so it's very difficult for state and federal providers to build a program that allows us to serve those towns in between the towns that have robust service. And so we have a two-pronged strategy, trying to get the existing folks to spread out service and trying to bring in new providers where we where we have gaps, where people can't fill it. I have had probably the greatest success in my career with getting a public partnership to build a robust project that includes an offshore cable landing, and is going through 16 of the smallest towns in the region, and also is covering and providing fiber to tribes. But in order to get to those tribal lands, we are looking to use the state's existing funding to build more middle miles out to those locations, and hoping the state will partner with us on providing some big heavy lifts. We also have so many challenges around environmental permitting, which can take in some cases 4 years to get permits to actually get service to smaller towns, which also have operating issues, like, are they big enough to have a robust system that that the kids need in order to learn? So we're really hopeful about this this funding and our opportunity to have the state and federal government help us get to those equity partners. But even with the current existing mapping efforts that are done about who's going to be eligible and who's not going to be eligible, we have challenges. Yesterday, I looked at the maps, and all of our tribal lands, Matt, this is going to go right into your talk, are considered served because they participate in the 2.5 gigahertz project. So literally, even though we know they're not served, they're not going to be eligible for funding that they're going to need in order to get service to them. So part of our job on the ground is to, like, scream, yell, holler when things like that happen, and try to get policies reversed to make sure that that funding is eligible. I'm going to stop there and turn it over to Matt to talk. We have in our area about 14 tribes. We have 3 of the largest and some of the smallest tribes. And I will not consider this effort successful unless all of those tribes get the service they need. And I feel an awesome responsibility on the ground to help make sure that happens.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Connie.
Connie. Matt?
I'll just jump in. Yeah, so I will address the 2.5 issue specifically, but I wanted to just talk about the tribal communities. I've been working, for almost 22 years now with the Southern California Tribal Chairmen's Association, and building out a very robust wireless microwave network that serves 17 reservations, something like 13 or 14 libraries, schools, Head Start programs, 105 tribal municipalities, 500 homes and growing, and served by fiber on both ends. We are connected to Scenic. Lewis Fox and I worked for years to try to figure out a way to connect the head end of the Tribal Digital Village Network to Scenic, and afford the opportunities that Scenic brings to communities, higher education, other educational opportunities, and just resources in general. And we successfully did that prior to the pandemic. And I think the 2.5 argument is hilarious, because, and I'll just dial it back to mapping, which is, how important is it have accurate data for mapping. And these tribes are in rural communities for the most part. Some of them have been absorbed by an urban community that's built around them. They still don't have services, even though they're surrounded by urban. They are misrepresented in the service area maps because we're still dealing with service area maps that are based on a marketing department from a provider. And the Marconi Society has done a lot of really hard work lately to try to solve this mapping issue, to dispel the issues that are being presented, solve some of the inaccuracies and help the federal map folks get more focused on what reality is versus what we have been presented in the past. I mean, it's specific to tell you where you need access to broadband. And what Connie specifically referenced was the fact that tribes were offered an opportunity through a tribal priority window to a 2.5 gigahertz spectrum license from the Federal Communications Commission. And tribes could apply and opt into that and then manage that frequency band over their own reservations and serve their communities with them. And so the real misconception here is that 2.5 gigahertz and the amount of spectrum that they actually got allocated to them is enough to serve an entire community with broadband, which is extremely false. 2.5 gigahertz is a screwdriver in a toolbox full of 50 other screwdrivers, 47 wrenches, and a number of other hammers and other things, pliers and such, to make this a reality to serve a community. The swath of spectrum allowed in 2.5 is not enough to serve a community that has, a certain number of households. The way that the frequency or the spectrum is used in densely populated areas, and a lot of reservations look like a suburb that's been taken from suburbia and set in the middle of the countryside. And so it's a tough solve for a wireless network without multiple spectrum bands to be able to utilize. So 2.5 is not the be all end all. It is a brilliant tool in the toolbox, and we welcome every opportunity to have access to more spectrum licenses for tribes. We push very hard for that opportunity, and that tribal priority window is a great vehicle for this, but does not solve the problem, and it should not discredit somebody or disqualify somebody or some region or community from being able to access other funding just because they own a license. And I think, we'll get into questions in a little bit of back and forth, but I think the reality of what's happening is that for the first time in my career history of 22 years doing this, I was formerly a graphic designer recovering, but I finally am seeing a significant dollar amount flowing directly to tribes. And this is, this is the first time and probably the last time in my career that this will happen. There have been numerous subsidy incentive programs and credits and different things applied to incumbents to serve tribal communities. And all of those efforts through the federal government over the past decades have failed to connect tribes. The tribes are still unserved or underserved. And I think, some of the things we'll be talking about today will dial in some of those solutions and the opportunity that's coming through the Middle Mile project that we'll get into. But I'll leave it there so we can pass it on to Kevin.
Thanks, Matt. By the way, I do encourage everyone to look at the bios to know, I mentioned one force of nature, but you're about to hear from 8 forces of nature who have impact, not just in their communities and in their regions, but in the state and nationally. And Kevin is one such person, and will bring us the sort of large urban perspective from Los Angeles.
Thanks, Louis. My name is Kevin Harbour, as you heard. I'm the president of BizFed Institute. I'm also the chair of the executive committee for the Los Angeles Orange County Regional Broadband Collaborative. As an organization, our goal is to convene forums around issues that affect our regional economy, in particular infrastructure, but it also included water, housing, and of course, broadband, energy. But, you know, if we take a step back and look, how did all this come about? How did we all of a sudden really start focusing on broadband infrastructure? When COVID hit in Los Angeles County, and there were county and state mandates around who could go to work, what you had to do when you went to work, school, medicine, we had to figure some things out because we had to keep our economy going. And what better organization to help convene all the subject matter experts, stakeholders, which includes business leaders, electeds, public agency leaders, nonprofits, community-based organizations. We all came together because we had to figure this out. And we had to figure out how to telecommute in terms of, you know, remote work. We had to figure out how to get healthcare with telemedicine. We had to learn how to go to school remotely. And one of the things that we found out right away that there are disparities. There were disparities in particular in underserved areas and unserved areas. And you know, you know, surprisingly, it hit all socioeconomic areas, but the high density urban areas were particularly hit hard with numbers like 20% of LAUSD and LA County, even students not being able to go to school. Some kids even lost a whole year. And that's just, that was just unacceptable. So we put together some regional broadband workshops where we brought all these folks together that had the power, control, and resources to not only have discussions on what we needed to do, but collaborate and invest in resources, funds, and their time to fix this. We're going into our 4th year in this effort. And, you know, I'm just so proud of the work that we've been able to do, but there's still a lot more work to do. You know, if you go ahead and hit me with thank you, with my next slide. So the first thing we found out was, how do we define geographically where the blank spots are? Because the first signal was when we had, you know, hospital appointments and people, you know, didn't have the bandwidth. You had multiple people in the home needing to access broadband, and there were a lot of reasons why they couldn't. But the bottom line is that we began to see that there were gaps in coverage mapping. So there was a big effort to get accurate information that still continues today. So we know what to do, right? And in doing so, we realized that we had a lot of work to do. We needed infrastructure build out. So in working with public agencies, statewide, county, municipal agencies like and institutions and commissions like the CPUC, California Department of Technology, of course, one of my favorites, CENIC, and Golden State Net, and also GoBiz in the early days, and California Emerging Technology Fund. We began to make progress, enough progress where we had information that we could bring to our elected officials on a state, county, municipal level. Look, we need to get going. We need to get something done. We needed to do it now. I had internet service providers sitting on my board. So, you know, we had to make sure that we didn't get into a finger pointing situation, but how do we get the resources? How do we create an environment where we could share information and make measurable progress? So we immediately began to focus on South LA because it was in East LA and parts of the San Fernando Valley, because it was immediately shown that, you know, these areas are hit the hardest, but also the outlying areas like the Antelope Valley, where Matt, I'm sure you don't know that there are tribal communities there, but also big rural communities and small towns. And they got kids out there, kids who go to school that can't go to school. So, you know, I was told by my board chair, Steve Pontel, that because of my background, 30 years in this stuff, I was with some of you who have gray hair know this name, Digital Equipment Corporation, and designing global network infrastructures and data centers, and then connecting them to fire and, law enforcement. And then all of a sudden, there came this idea about an information superhighway. And in 1994, when the Telecom Act hit, I transitioned from Digital Equipment, who was purchased by HP, by the way, to GTE. And the Telecom Act said, hey, look, anybody can go out and provide data or voice support or service. So we began to connect the data centers to this idea, and we began to populate it with features that businesses and people could use. And so this continued to evolve. But the first look I got at the digital divide was which analog switches were going to be switched go to digital. So all that to say this is not a new occurrence. History is repeating itself in a lot of ways. And I think we learned a lot from this process because, instead of just worrying about infrastructure itself, we began to look at some of the other root causes of why people can't access the internet. Affordability, adoption, we really don't know that, what the internet is about. Literacy, how do I learn? Seniors, kids, and then the devices with organizations like Human IT providing incredibly low price devices for internet access. So we began to understand that we had to look at the middle mile and we had to build it out so that the last mile, which allows connectivity to businesses and homes, could be possible. We had to get with the internet service providers, and to the extent that they could without revealing proprietary information, and other organizations, GeoLink and others, how do we really define it and how do we get it accurate? So collaboration was the key to accelerating this process, and it had to be done. And I'm proud to say that, we've been a part of this, and we've had, people like Tony Tavares of Caltrans, talk about their 10,000-mile network and what needed to be done to move that along. And, when you look at, the progress that we've made, I think that the progress helped bring funding to the area to show that we could actually get this done. And so, working with people like Louis Fox and Tony Naughton and Eric Hunziker, who have been incredible and, jumping on forums with our organization and others, and working with LA Deal, who is the Los Angeles County CPUC recognized consortia, and all the others, in particular, the LA Orange County Regional Broadband Consortia, who have been with me from the beginning, and they were part of the original Los Angeles consortia. Companies like Manchester Community Technologies, headed up by Dr. Reverend Williams, Southeast Community Development Corp, headed up by Emma Hernandez, and Medea Tech, headed up by Brenda Traynor. And various other organizations from LA County's Information Services Division, LA County Public Works, headed up by Mark Pastrella, Peter Liu, who at that time was the acting CIO of the LA County CIO's office, and many more. The coalitions that we put together with SCAG and SANDAG, and all these efforts for collaboration so that we can figure out how to get this done, justify projects, identify projects in South LA, San Gabriel, East and South LA, Catalina Island, Antelope Valley, and have organizations invest like the Vermont Slauson Economic Development Corporation. They invested in the Youth Technology Center. All that to say, this is an ongoing effort. I respect and appreciate all of you for joining. And I hope that at the end of the day, we're able to continue to move the needle forward and get the 98% of households online, or 100% actually, so that we can experience digital equity as a human right. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. It should be clear to everyone participating that while we have former mayors like Connie, who now at Cal Poly Humboldt, and Matt representing a multitude of tribes, working with them in California, and Kevin. These aren't just policy folks. These are roll up their sleeves and do work. So there's not, I think that's one of the things that is most inspiring about working in California, is that as you'll see across this entire panel, it isn't just policy people that everybody is deeply involved, and the community perspectives are really driving what we're doing in California. With that, I want to move on to the next section, and then we may have some questions for bring all of the panelists in before we go to the third section. And this is on California public policy and funding. And we have Kim Lewis starting, and then Barbara Hayes. Kim?
Yeah, good morning, afternoon for everyone. Kim Lewis with CNIC, and as Vint noted, as some of the early internet pioneers knew, the commercialization of the internet really made it more challenging for a lot of our researchers at R1 institutions to use the public internet to do their critical work, and that resulted in many of California's technology leaders at Stanford, USC, Caltech, CSU, and USC to kind of come together and figure out a vision to address this emerging need together collectively. And out of that, CNIC was formed as a 501c3 in 1997 to represent the common interest of California's higher education, academic, and research communities to really achieve robust, high capacity, next generation network services. Over the years, we had the privilege of being able to expand our tent to capture all of the entire education community and ensure that we brought in community colleges, our K-12 system, our public libraries, Naval Postgraduate School, and many others from cultural institutions, museums, healthcare, and as Matt noted, some of our tribal entities. Next slide. And one of the first objectives in the creation of CNIC was the California Research and Education Network as a high bandwidth, high capacity internet network specifically designed to meet the unique needs of our education and research community. The backbone, as you can see on this slide, is composed of several network layers designed to meet our members' needs, plus metro fiber and thousands of last mile circuits and fibers that we purchase from nearly every single commercial provider in California. Most of our members are connected at a minimum of 1 gigabit per second symmetrical services. Very important. We have always been a leader on ensuring that we are pushing symmetrical bandwidth. Many of our members also connect at 10 gigabits per second, many at hundreds gigabits, and soon 400 gigabits per second at our leading research universities. We connect to our member institutions in each and every county in the state. For example, all of our county offices of education are node sites that directly connect to one or more of our CalRen backbone node sites throughout the state. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that in addition to CalRen, that CNIC also collaborates and works with other educational network partners, our Western Regional Network that connects research organizations in the Western states and Hawaii, as well as PAC-WAVE, which is an international peering fabric connecting our US research community to parts of Oceania and the Asia Pacific region. CNIC really has a long history of working on broadband deployment projects and focusing on access and equity for its 12,000 member institutions, serving nearly 20 million Californians today. Next. Just briefly, by joining CNIC, I want to talk a little bit about what are some of the benefits of participating in this robust research and education network. To highlight a few, our members enjoy unlimited access to key cloud and content providers through CNIC's robust peering infrastructure and relationships with over 100 networks, as well as the commodity internet. We leverage our extensive relationships with dozens of commercial providers of goods and services on behalf of our members and CNIC's vast buying power to provide circuits and other equipment at the best possible prices. Our 24/7, 365 network operations center works around the clock to monitor and manage the network. In addition, I'd note that we also operate two of the largest E-rate consortiums in the country, serving the statewide needs of K-12 and public libraries to ensure our members are getting the lowest prices possible and accessing the full suite of subsidies that are available to them. Next slide. And so what does this look like in practice? Well, in K-12, what we've seen in California when they moved to the advent of online testing, our network engineers created a direct private path to those testing servers in Illinois from CalRen. And we monitor that path to ensure network performance is never compromised to support the best testing experience for our students. We set a record with over 570,000 students simultaneously testing at the same time. During COVID, we supported our researchers at R1 institutions who were focused on vaccine development to be able to access and share big data sets for those initial COVID-19 vaccines and for ongoing research and variants of new ones. Next. And yes, during the pandemic, the importance of broadband and connectivity became front and center. For CNIC, the usage of the network increased as our students, faculty, and staff moved online instructions and also at the home. We were pulled into conversations with policymakers around the digital divide and were strong advocates for digital equity, creating white papers, policy documents, and strategies that can be pursued, and in SB 156 that I know Barbara's going to speak to next. We continued our work to bring high-speed broadband to unserved and underserved schools and libraries. We connected nearly 500 individual school sites and nearly 1,000 libraries. We also work across state lines to enhance coordination and communication with our Western states and other RENs to secure enhanced investments in broadband to our community anchor institutions. I think digital equity has been a foundational value of CNIC since its inception, and one which we continue to live by today, and our nearly 3 decades of work in this arena brings us to that role of third-party administrator through our Golden State Net, and in support and partnership with the governor and legislature's vision to achieve a broadband for all. And with that, I think that concludes my remarks, and I'll turn over to Barbara.
Thanks, Kim. Barbara, you're muted.
I always think I'm on. Good morning, afternoon, everyone. I want to take the picture that Kim just painted and kind of narrow it down a level to that of rural California. So I represent an organization called Rural County Representatives of California. We have 40 of the state's 58 counties as members. This is an organization that was started some 50 plus years ago to provide advocacy and lobbying assistance to California's rural counties. It's grown not only in size over the last 50 plus years, but also in scope, with the addition of a robust business development arm that has a very talented and sophisticated group of finance experts. And then just 5 years ago, when I came on board, we formally established an economic development arm for the organization. We are, as the slide in front of you shows, governed by one elected supervisor from each of our 40 member counties. And we are, as you see again on the slide, a large beast, if you will, smaller than the state, but not by much. So the way that Rural County Representatives of California works is our lobbying and advocacy sits within the RCRC organization. And for initiatives and larger programs, we form what are called affiliate entities. And if you could jump to the next slide, please. In December of 2021, the RCRC board formed Golden State Connect Authority. It shares the same 40 county members as RCRC does, and it was formed specifically to house RCRC's broadband program of work. And you can see there the 3 areas of focus that the board has directed us to pursue. And I want to just touch very quickly on the key priorities associated with our program of work. Is we believe very strongly in fiber deployment, as and we say fiber first very intentionally, with the understanding that fiber will not be able to serve all addresses throughout our 40 members. And by that, we will have to partner with operators who deploy alternative methods of technology. But our focus under Golden State Connect Authority is really to get fiber as far and wide as we can. It should be noted, and I'll reinforce Connie's comment at the start of this discussion, that those of you that have traveled to rural California know that we are both the beneficiaries and we handle all of the downside associated with the beauty that comes from this area. And by that, I mean the geography and the geology associated with our area, which is wonderful for tourism, but a little bit difficult when you're deploying broadband infrastructure. So again, the focus on fiber first, with the understanding that fiber may not be the solution everywhere. Capacity simply points to the fact that we want to start the conversation at gig or higher. No more are we starting at the low level of minimum required, where we set our aspirations higher. We, like the state, are linking arms and really embracing the broadband for all. We are looking at every address served across our 40 rural counties. And we're going to do that through leveraging of partnerships and resources. As you'll hear a common theme throughout, no one entity and no one model will get it done. Before we jump to the next slide, I just want to focus on the 3rd bullet there under our program of work, which is the heaviest lift, and that which I'd like to focus on is Golden State Connect Authority is taking on the task or the responsibility of deploying, which is new to rural California, an open access last mile municipal broadband network. It's not something that we have long held aspiration to do. We are doing it simply because the existing model has not worked for rural California. The private sector driven model doesn't fit nicely when you try and lay it on rural California due to lower densities, longer spans between communities, and again, that geology and geography that I mentioned earlier. So this is an area, this is the biggest task that Golden State Connect Authority will be taking on. And I want to talk about it against the backdrop of SB 156. And if you could jump to my final slide, please. Thank you. So SB 156, for those of you that are not in California, was passed and signed by the governor in July of 2021. And it was historic on many different levels, not the least of which was the funding that you see there, $6 billion dedicated to advancing broadband infrastructure across the state. But it was also historic for the things that had non-monetary input. So it brought open access to California in a bold new way. It for the very first time ever in statute established or gave counties the right to own, operate, and maintain broadband infrastructure. So I want to start at the bottom of this slide. These are the 4 component pieces of SB 156 from a programmatic point of view and the associated funding levels. And just to give you a very quick example of how Golden State Connect Authority is putting SB 156 to work, is we partner with our member counties to have them apply for the local agency technical assistance program, which provided free broadband deployment funds to local governments and tribes and nonprofits to do whatever the project was as defined, up to but not including shovels in the ground. So all of that work that needed to be done before you deploy broadband infrastructure. Golden State Connect Authority worked with and is partnering with 32 of our member counties and 8 cities therein to implement network design under what we refer to as the LADA program, the Local Agency Technical Assistance. That network design, rolling up to the next program there, will be used to inform the financial stack, if you will, associated with each of the project areas that are designed under the LADA program. And that $750 million loan loss reserve is also a brand new program for California. These are dollars that are intended to be used by local governments and nonprofits to securitize funding that allows for deployment of broadband infrastructure. As you see there on the slide, it's still in the rulemaking process, and we really, fingers crossed, hope that we will be able to get to a program that works for this need, hopefully before the end of this year. Q3 may be ambitious on my part, or aspirational. And then in that financial stack, there was $2 billion allocated to what is called the Federal Fund Account / FFA Last Mile Grant Program. These are dollars that have been allocated across the state based on unserved and underserved addresses to be used to deploy broadband infrastructure with a heavy emphasis on fiber. ISPs and network administrators can apply for these dollars. And again, the CPUC oversees all of these programs. Well, the Last Mile Loan Loss and Local Agency Technical Assistance, we hope to have the Last Mile program open in the coming weeks / months. And then, of course, the boldest move is that open access middle mile that the state is building with the wonderful assistance from Golden State Net. I should just call out, Golden State Net is the middle mile, Golden State Connect is our effort on last mile. So the two are separate efforts, but we are working very collaboratively together. So Golden State Connect, just to wrap up, is really tapping the Local Agency Technical Assistance Fund on behalf of our member counties to do that network design. And then we will also tap the loan loss reserve and the FFA last mile dollars to build out the financing that will allow us to deploy that open access last mile network across rural California. And with that, Louis, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you, Barbara. We'll move on with the program, but I do want to come back to the panelists, and you can mull this over a bit and ask you how these multiple funding programs are integrated and what kinds of instantiations are already underway, or do you imagine in the future that integrate all these elements. But with that, we're going to move to the middle mile as a key equity strategy and start with Sylvie, and then Eric, and then Tony.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. A question we often get asked is, why would a research and education network like CNIC get involved in such a project, and why the members are supported? I believe throughout the dialogue so far today, many examples of how network service providers such as CNIC have the knowledge and partnerships to effectively anticipate, deliver, and support the technology needs beyond those of the research and education institutions. As Kim Lewis highlighted, CNIC understands the network they provide to the member institutions and their associates extends to the communities they are part of. The schools, research institutions, libraries, and hospitals are centers for their neighborhoods for social gatherings and essential services. The pandemic clearly highlighted for CNIC's members the digital divide throughout California and the impacts of this disparity, as has been highlighted by many panelists that you've heard so far. We saw the challenges students, faculty, staff, and clinicians and their families faced when the necessary network access was not available or sufficient. Members availed their campuses and technology capabilities to their communities to help bridge these gaps. Technology-enabled private spaces were provided for telehealth visits. Stanford Children's Hospital partnered with local libraries and schools to provide spaces for families to come and have their telehealth visits. And the interesting benefit from this is they actually found the intake to be um, of a higher quality because the children were more accustomed to the platform that they were utilizing to communicate with their clinicians. Just a side benefit. We also made available access to wireless infrastructure across our campuses to the public. And it actually also guided our strategy and future enhancements as well. Looking at Wi-Fi wasn't just for buildings. We needed to make it available in outdoor areas and garages and other areas where more people could take advantage of the infrastructure we could provide. As for many, the pandemic sparked the call to action. It highlighted for Scenic's members the resources and advantages we have to do more, to expand the benefits and opportunities we can provide beyond the brick and mortar of our facilities and immediate geography. The California Middle Mile Initiative presents the perfect opportunity for Scenic and its members to support closing the digital divide and partnering with all the panelists here, their efforts and institutions. Thank you.
Thanks, Sylvie. Eric?
Yeah, hi, I'm Eric Hunsinger. 30 years of, I've got 30 years of commercial telecom perspective. About a half dozen years ago, Lewis invited me to join Scenic to collaborate on projects. I had the good fortune of encountering Scenic 20 years ago when their network was just an OC12 network. That doesn't really mean anything to most folks these days, but an OC12 for perspective is literally 600 megabits. And the entire Cal State network was run on that backbone. So when Scenic, as Sylvie described, when Scenic got use of fiber, they were able to transform the networking infrastructure for the entire .edu landscape within California. And I think that just demonstrates what can happen when a non-commercial entity can get assets which it controls for the benefit of the public at large. And that's exactly what this initiative with the state of California is undertaking. It needs to be a mix of partnerships with commercial entities for various reasons, to reduce costs, to go to market, to rely on the expertise of commercial entities who do networking day in or day out. But as Connie Stewart noted, often those business models really cherry pick the ripe opportunities for revenues and really drive corporate perspective. And so then the digital divide gets widened and folks are left behind. As Barbara also noted, in rural counties, there's vast swaths of areas without access to any sort of infrastructure. And it's at those areas that the state of California has to invest directly and construct the network themselves. The only way we're going to be successful as we develop this is through a mixed level of development with partnerships, commercial, direct build, joint builds, and efforts that really maximize the tax dollars and gets infrastructure exactly where it needs to go. You know, it's a pretty big task. The state of California is a very large swath of land. And I remember when I was at one particular company and they were developing a network nationwide, they had targeted 10,000 miles. And that's the goal for the state of California, is 10,000 miles to cover all areas within California. What we have to do in addition to getting that infrastructure in place is we need to revise that business model that a standard telecom company uses. We need to turn that business model upside down and make every inch of the network available for entities that are ready today and entities that might be conceived tomorrow. And we are able to do that physically, logically throughout the network. And that is the one philosophical difference that separates us from a commercial effort. You've heard from some of the other panelists the desperate need to develop connectivity in their areas of perspective, tribal areas, rural, etc. And only through guidance by the state of California and the federal investment in this network are we able to achieve that.
Thanks,
it to Tony? Yeah.
Thank you, Eric. Tony?
Thank you, Louis. I'm Tony Naughton. I'm the president and COO of Golden State Net. Golden State Net is wholly owned, a subsidiary of Scenic, and we are I guess I would say, the operating arm through which Scenic is lending its know-how, its expertise, and support to the state of California in the development of a middle mile network throughout the state as a result of SB 156, the Broadband for All Act. And it's interesting and important to note that the Broadband for All Act is not just about last mile. Of course, it also allows for a key enabling resource in the form of a middle mile network to provide interconnectivity from last mile locations, especially those that have been unserved or underserved, back to public peering locations and exchange points to connect those places with, of course, the rest of the global internet through what are typically conventional peering processes. My background goes back many decades to the early 80s. I started out as a staff counsel to a large cable television MSO. At the time, it wasn't a large MSO, but became a very large multi-system operator in the cable TV industry. I moved from there out to the Pacific Northwest, became involved in the CLEC business, running the first CLEC actually in the state of Washington, that at the time our now friends from US West were quick to take action against, but over the years became a more harmonious relationship. That actually, after a short period of time, exposed me to, in 1991, something called the Internet and the NSFnet in particular. And I soon after that became one of the one of the directors of a regional NSFnet gateway company called NorthwestNet, which of course was primarily focused in partnership with the University of Washington, at first primarily focused to connect up the what I'll call traditional constituents and audiences of the NSFnet, higher education, eventually expanding that into K-12 districts and private K-12 schools, community colleges, of course, and various other forms of mostly public entities such as libraries, state governments themselves, and hospitals. Many of those are the kinds of organizations today we refer to as anchor institutions. In my career, I went on from there just prior to the time that the internet became commercial to start a company which was one of the earliest managed service providers in the entire internet industry. Ran that company for about 6 years and remained involved for another 3 or 4 years after that. And then since that time have been involved in a variety of mostly institutional venture-backed companies that are involved in either developing network infrastructure, network technology, or services around the enablement and provision of network to various kinds of audiences. Several years ago, I had the pleasure and opportunity to start working with Scenic and Louis, and worked on a variety of projects until about 2 years ago when I got a call from Louis telling me about the pending SB 156 legislation in California, the Broadband for All Act, and what resulted in Scenic taking a third-party administrator partner role in this large endeavor that we are very deeply involved and very deeply committed to at this point. It appears to us that this was the largest endeavor of its kind, at this time at least, in the United States. And that's a reflection of the importance and significance and size of the state of California. I'm here today to talk about some key considerations. to take into account when working with either a state agency partner or other government authorized entity in the creation of a middle mile or sub-middle mile network, as it may be. I think you want to consider and assess the type of development authority, partner, or agency you have. And in particular, do they have experience at operating either network infrastructure directly or some other type of infrastructure? Or is the partner, on the other hand, more of an administrative type agency? The extent of operating experience that your authorized partner will have a significant impact on the role of the implementation partner that is bringing the experience-based know-how to the development of the middle mile network. That, of course, is what Golden State Net via CNIC is really doing, bringing that experience and know-how to assist the state, both in the development of this network, which will be over 8,000 miles in distance, as well as then operating the network for the first several years of its existence around the state. So assessment and preparation of a programmatic approach to take with a development partner should take into account some very fundamental but very important things. The relevant experience along these lines of staff and leadership from the state agency partner or other government authorized entity that's involved on behalf of the state. Number two, the political and policy objectives of the network development effort from the state partner's standpoint. Naturally, understandably, logically, there's idealism involved here, which is important because it includes critical policy considerations as well as, yes, politics as well. It is a government entity after all. So idealism on one side, and then on the other side, the question of pragmatism, where pragmatism in this context is about program execution that's very focused on cost effectiveness, time to service for the middle mile to last mile customers, as much as possible. And maybe this is an obvious statement, but as much as possible, this needs to be continually managed so that there can be a workable balance between that pragmatism and that idealism in the execution of the program. So a key question at a high level is the degree to which program objectives can be achieved without sacrificing any more of the practical considerations than necessary in the process of developing a network. And it's important to note, it's not just a network. It needs to be a network that is carrier class in nature, as a high performance infrastructure, and with the capabilities you would expect that kind of infrastructure to have. In other words, to serve under and unserved households, businesses, et cetera, in the last mile, as well as other open access customers who will be entitled to use this network like they would any other carrier provided network, making sure that this network is as qualitative or better than any existing telecom networks that have been servicing homes and businesses from conventional carriers and providers for many years. To the extent the government partner has taken into account the cost of long-term operation and maintenance for that network, that is another key consideration that needs to be continually examined and re-examined. Program decision-making by a state government partner, especially fiscal ones, need to be well-informed and need to include adequate planning looking forward, not just on the operational quality of the network, but of course, the long-term cost of operation and maintenance, a very, very important aspect of this. To the degree that the state partner doesn't have operating experience, as the operating partner, you need to take into account every effort you can make to educate your good government partner on the fundamentals of network technology as much as possible from the bottom up, especially if the partner wants to gravitate over time toward making program decisions that are more top-down in nature. But those decisions need to be well-informed decisions. So there's a degree of preparedness that the entity such as ourselves needs to have to educate the state agency partner along the way in an appropriate way. Obvious, if not logical point. As a network knowledgeable, capable partner, have you then developed materials and content with which to educate and inform your your government entity partner on the ways and means of developing and operating a carrier class middle mile network. Even if the partner has relevant experience along these lines, do your materials and content for educational purposes explain the fundamentals of how the network technology works, at least in sufficient detail, and do so in the context of the classic OSI stack, which is a well-proven and convenient method with which to analyze and break down various issues, planning aspects, and other parts of the network development. A really key aspect as well is a buy versus build versus borrow analysis that's needed at the front end of these programs, and what the probable economics of each option are, as well as the development processes and likely timeframes in a middle mile network program, such as the one we're involved in here in California. Net, you want to equip your partner in the state government to make fully well-informed decisions about middle mile program objectives, how to define and achieve success for the program, and how you can plan to ensure that your partner is going to be well situated and capable of achieving success, which is measured really by how well the network fulfills the objectives. In the case of California, the objectives of serving unserved and underserved communities, as well as the needs of other open access customers to this network from various sectors, be they commercial, government, or otherwise. These are some of the key considerations that we've tried to live by and promote in our role as the third-party administrator in the large California middle mile network endeavor. We are honored to be in that role, working with the California Department of Technology and with Caltrans very, very closely, and look forward to success, where success is measured by the integrity of that network, making sure it's as high quality in nature as any other commercial network out there, to serve those who up to this point have not been served. This is a large endeavor around the principles of both equity and equality, and addressing diverse constituents both in rural areas as well as dense urban populated areas. There are many places in California that still need service in the last mile, many people, and that's what this entire endeavor is really about when the day is done. It's about people. And the middle mile network is an important enabler for interconnectivity from those edge network locations in those neighborhoods and small towns and elsewhere to the rest of the global core of the internet. And it's great to be part of this program. And of course, last but not least, we are learning many things ourselves along the way.
Thank you, Tony. To the participants, if you have questions for the panelists, if you put them in the chat, and then I'll hopefully get to some of the questions. I want to start, though, with the question that I threatened earlier, and that is, panelists, how do you see these various funding streams, last mile, loan loss reserve, ladder grants, middle mile, coming together and ultimately serving, as Tony said, the interests of these and underserved rural and tribal and urban communities?
I'll jump in from the tribal perspective real fast. So 2016, we did a study with the administration, CTO of the United States, and found 8,000 missing middle miles in the lower 48. So California has 1,800 of those missing middle miles. Massive deficit. We also did some desktop engineering to understand what it might look like to have a network on every single reservation. 574 federally recognized tribes in the nation, not to mention the countless state recognized tribes. But the 574, we estimated a rough $7 billion deficit, not including the missing middle mile, which could be around $1 billion. But that piece of the puzzle that is that is missing is the network itself, and we guesstimated in about a $7 billion range. The NTIA, Department of Commerce, released the Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program, and we saw an opportunity for $1 billion, a foundational $1 billion in the tribal communities. So there was an ask by half of the tribes for $5.8 billion. And the speculation that we had made on a $7 billion network in 2016 with inflation and the changes in the environment has changed that number to roughly $10 billion. So in this next round of the Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program that will come through, that is funded by the IIJA funding, or will be let's see, about 270-ish tribes applying that haven't applied yet. And then some of the tribes that were denied because there was only $1 billion in the initial fund. Eventually $2 billion was allocated. But we're going to see what the result is from the folks that haven't applied yet. So we are in that deficit. We have $3 billion towards the tribal solution out of roughly 10. So where do we come up with a 7? If you do not weave together Rural Utilities, RUS, California Public Utilities Commission's last mile programs, all of the different funding opportunities, the technical assistance programs, and even private sources to be able to pull this off, partnerships with the state builds and the things of that nature, the Middle Mile Broadband Initiative. There is no way to solve this from any one fund. So the ability to interweave the different opportunities that exist at the federal, state, and local levels, and ensure that those work together to build an end result and a final solution is paramount to the success of this. And all of these programs, every single one of these programs does not deal with operating expenses. So you must be designing sustainable solutions when you're getting all this CapEx funding to be able to manage something moving forward. A lot of communities are not going to be able to pay for the operations and maintenance and repair of a network over time. So how do you sort that out? These funds, all of these different funds are key to make this happen. Thanks.
Thanks. Kevin, you have a brief answer for us.
Thanks, Louis. Yeah, I'll keep it brief. In terms of funding, let's start with the local agency technical assistance funds. You know what you don't know. And for a lot of municipalities, in order for them to identify projects, they needed to bring on subject matter experts and people that understood fiber connectivity, data centers, best route, regional exchange points, like the list goes on. So this gave them an opportunity to bring in experts that could help identify, map out, and write a project so that they could in fact apply for a larger amount of funds to execute the projects. In a lot of areas where you have gaps in coverage, as indicated by coverage mapping, a lot of the ISPs, their decisions are made based on critical mass and return on investment. So in order to get build out, you're going to have some government subsidy funds to go along with that in order for something to actually happen. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. We have, unfortunately, I wish we had another hour to have a conversation with all of you. But one thing that I would like to have each of you reflect on for 30 seconds to a minute is, since we have a diverse group of participants from around the country, would you each say for 30 seconds or more, or a minute, what's the thing that you've learned in this work in California that you'd like to share with other states? Barbara, maybe we'll start with you.
I would say, because Rural County Representatives of California sits between the state government where the money and the programs are and the local governments that comprise our member counties, is having partners. And I'm doubling down on what was just mentioned by Tony and Eric. having partners really is how we're going to get this done. And that has become crystal clear. So it's not only government partners, it's private partners, it's organizational partners, it's partners at all levels are needed if we're going to crack this nut.
Thanks. Connie?
I would say keep your goal in mind, and keep reminding folks as they design programs and policies of that overarching goal, because then you can hold them accountable for designing to that goal as opposed to just building programs in silos.
Thank you. Kim?
Well, I'd say a couple. It's a little bit of, this is a team sport. We need everyone, and everyone brings a different piece to the puzzle and brings different things to bear, where we can streamline things and make things more efficient and create easy and access. I think that would be a huge win for other states to think about, of where can we make things easier and shared services and bring all the partners who are doing the work to the table, and to be all in this together, because everyone needs the same end goal that everyone wants, is working towards that same positive vision.
Thanks. Eric?
So, you know, some of the things that have been described here by Kevin and Matt and Barbara are about the problem at the local level. And often money goes in to fix a specific issue at the local level, and where it misses is the need to interconnect back to the larger telecom world. Without that connection, those last mile investments aren't effective. And if there's any one thing I've learned in this process, is that it's not just the interconnectedness of the network, but the solutions and the variety of solutions in corporate partnerships, direct construction. It is a multifaceted problem, and there is not one single solution that can solve it. And I would say for any state, that solution set is a complex mix unique to their problem. But commercial partnerships, direct construction, and listening to the constituents can help define how those networks get built.
Thanks. Sylvie?
The first thing that comes to mind is it takes a village, which I think all of you have echoed. But I think we've been really focused on what broadband will bring to these communities immediately, but I'm looking farther ahead. Broadband or network access is going to make implementing and addressing legacy solutions, such as Connie's reference to handsets. Think about what infrastructure and network will bring. It'll make adoption and more rapid deployment of whatever those future technologies are. Those are my closing thoughts.
Tony?
I have a pretty basic common sense answer, and I'll start with reminding how I was talking about a few minutes ago, the importance of trying to achieve a balance between idealism on the one hand, which needs to be there for policy and other purposes, versus pragmatism on the other, where it's about efficiency, effectiveness, time to service, and those kinds of things. And quite simply, maintaining a happy balance to the extent possible between those two extremes, and doing that, and here's the common sense part, through good, sensible, honest relationship management that's based on trust between partners and patience between partners. And that works both ways. That works both ways. Not necessarily an innovative answer to your question, Lewis, but a very truthful one.
Thanks. Matt?
So I'll dovetail into what Tony was talking about there. And, you know, we all come from different walks of life, different communities, different knowledge bases, and we all are expected to now learn technology and grow with technology. And everybody's at a different level and different understanding. And we've all had different career experiences, and working together with partners, and you can't do this alone. You know, there's managing expectations, managing personalities, managing things like that, and everybody learning to leave their ego on the table and move past that, to make sure that you know, these efforts are being done for the focus on the end goal rather than the individual perspective, because we're all fighting the same battle. It's hard because a lot of people have come from different places and different different walks, and it's key for all of us to realize that we're all solving this goal together, and if we can set aside some of those differences, then I think we all succeed. So I'm just excited to be able to work with some of the same partners again, and some of the new partners that we've been introduced to over the years to be able to solve this for Indian country. So thanks.
Thank you. I'm just going to take the moderator's prerogative and say that all of us, we've talked about this, that we all thought that the solution to the issues here were going to be the will of the state to solve the problem and the resources to do it. And what we've learned along the way is that it takes also partnerships, it takes imagination, and it takes courage. There's a set of intangibles that are sort of fundamental to projects like this. I do want to thank the Marconi Society, Paula and Chantel in particular for helping us put this together, Dennis for opening it up, and Vint for his comments. And I hope you all will participate in the coming state case studies. I'm sure they'll learn from both what we did and what we didn't do. And I thank all of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to spend it with us. And we're all, the slides will be there. As you work on your projects, we certainly want to continue the conversation collectively and individually with you. So thank you very much.